Hey everybody, another um, episode of Why Me? And of course, this is from I'm Not Childish. I'm at a higher level of immaturity. My life now is getting ready to split and go in two directions. I'm married, I have a child, got a second one coming, and I'm running my business full time. The business is one direction, the family is another. Although it doesn't feel that way, in reality, when I look back, that's what was going on. And in fact, later on in life, I came up with this saying, which maybe is um, used by others as well, but um, I say that life is good if your family is going well and your work is going well. Life is alright and I can survive it if my family's going well and my work is shitty. Or the other way around. If my work is going well but my home life is shitty. But nothing works when your home life and your work is shitty. Well, at this point in my life, I'd say my work is doing pretty well. My home life is not so good. But we're going to talk about mostly about my work this time, I imagine. I have my business starting. I have customers coming in. It's pretty much word of mouth for anything that I do. I'm reckless as far as running the business. I'm disorganized as far as the shop itself. It looks like garbage. I mean, it's trashy. In fact, I should have dug up some photos of it. And um, I'm not as dependable as I should be. I think the quality of my work is alright, but the way I deal with my customers, I have no clues what I'm doing there. I have a lot to learn. So here are some pictures of the inside of my building. You can probably see things look pretty scuzzy. Here you can see I'm also not in very nice clothing or anything like that. I look dirty as crap. But somehow when I started out, that was okay. That seemed like the way it should be. My attitude or whatever it was. Um, it's just the way things were back then. I didn't see the importance in appearance. And it also reflected in my work. My work may worked very well, but it didn't look very good. In fact, I remember when I got my first lesson on appearance. I went out to another shop's business, another guy's business. In fact, he showed cattle as well when he was younger, and he was down to 4-H fair the same time I was, and I was looking at some of his work, and he thought that I was looking at his quality of his welding, which I actually wasn't. I was just looking at his construction, the way he put things together. He says, welding doesn't look too hot, does it? As if I was a critic of welding. Now, I welded to have it stay together. I never attempted to make it look good. I've learned how to, but I never thought that was that important. Um, and I didn't say anything when he said about the welds. Then I looked at him. Yeah, they weren't the greatest, but still, I didn't see anything wrong with them. But then he said, "Do you see how shiny the paint is?" And for me, paint was nothing. That was just something to protect from rust. I never um, worried about it, except when I was painting cars. Now, when I was painting a car, well, then it was a completely different story. Anyway, then he says, monkeys like shiny things. He says they won't see the welds. They'll just see how nice and pretty it looks. That was my first lesson on appearance. And he was right. Funny as it may seem, appearance is a big issue. Big issue. So when we see like the government choosing or voting on whether we're going to go with this airplane or that airplane, the first thing is if the appearance of the plane is appealing to them. It really has nothing to do with its capabilities. It's got to look good. The A-10 Warthog looked ugly to start with, and they didn't even want the plane, and especially since it was ugly. So we have that problem. I don't know that I'm quite geared that way mentally, because I look at, you might say, comforts. So let's say I'm buying a car. Does it have air conditioning? If it has power windows, that's good, because I can run the windows up and down without, if it has power door locks, that's good. If it has power mirrors, that's really good. Does it have a lot of horsepower? That's somewhat important. But does it have good gas mileage? Those are the things that I look for. If it's got a dent in the side, hey, if it's buying used, it's used. That's the way it is. If I buy a brand new car, however I take it off of the lot is how I'm going to treat it from that day forward. I will say, though, that like when I got my BMW, I had it cleaned or washed every 3 weeks. But I also had the money to do it. And I bought it used. So it wasn't like I, was a rich person. So anyway, in my shop work, I was doing okay, but I was having to learn everything by experience. And as I grew, with my understanding of how to treat my customers, how to communicate with them is maybe even different from treating them. I actually came to the point that I'm trying to think of how to say this. I worked for a company after I closed my business, and they had this course called Customer is King. And so that meant, and in their minds, and a lot of people's minds at that company, if the customer wanted it, that was it. That's what you got to give them. But I learned that you need to educate your customers. You got to explain to them, because they may not really want what they think they want. And that was a big one for me and for the customer. For example, a guy would come in and he says, "Can you do this right away?" And it's a simple welding job, but I'm going to have to stop what I'm doing, reset my welder for that work, weld it. So I learned to charge for that. I would say, well, I can do it right now. It's going to cost you $15. Really? That much? Just remember, this is back in the 80s, and I'm dealing a lot with farmers, so money is tight. I say, but you know what? I can guarantee you this job will be done, in 2 to 3 days, whatever. And it'll only cost you $5 if you allow me to work it in when I can. But if I have to stop everything right now, blah, 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 and do it, then it's going to be this much. Oh, well, then I'll be coming back through here. I said, yeah, 2 days, whatever. And that's all it'll be. That was one way I had to learn to communicate with my customer and do the best for them. That's what I'm doing. But it's also the best for me because I've promised something that I'm already working on. And that means I have to get that done. And if I have to stop everything and change over equipment and things like that, I lose like a half hour every time that happens. And you say, well, that's bullshit. Well, no, it is the truth. And the reason you lose that is, first off, you had to talk to the customer. Of course, once my customers learned how to just drop stuff off, well, then that saved me time. But even after I'm done with that customer, I got to go back and pick up where I left off. So that means I have to remember where I'm at. I got to go through a sequence of checks to make sure that I'm ready to go on with the next step. And that's because everything I do is one-off. So there's no blueprint, there's no procedure for how to do it. I establish that as I go. So these are the kind of things customers, come in and they say, I want to build a box like this. I said, well, what do you use it for? Well, I'm going to have fittings welded in it, and I'm going to put it under, and I'm going to use it as a water tank. Now, a water tank is pretty hard to build when it's square if it's pressurized. I said, that's why water tanks are built round and have domed ends on them and things like that. And I say, well, I can do something better for you and less expensive, if we go round. And they'll go, oh, well, it doesn't matter. I just need this many gallons. I say, okay, well, then that's how we'll do it. There's things like that. They might ask for it to be made one way, and I say, well, if I use tubing instead of I-beams, I can save you money, and I have the materials here, so I'm not having to order anything special. Which is another thing. They don't know what is easily available and what's not. So you have to educate them. So it isn't always doing just what the customer wants. You get them to the point of where they want to be, but maybe not quite the same way they were thinking. And sometimes they may be just going to spend money that's going to be pissed down the drain because they didn't understand the physics or the engineering that they're asking for. I had one guy, I finally figured out what he was building. I never told him, but he was trying to make perpetual motion. And with everything he did, he gained what he thought he should, but then he lost it all again. And the whole thing came down to is he wasn't allowing for friction. And that was going to be his killer. And so I would try to do things for him and at least do them as cheap as possible, because I knew he wasn't going to succeed with what he was doing. But I I couldn't hardly tell him, don't try. There's a case where, who knows? Maybe he would have hit it and then it'd been a great thing for him. Well, I'll share something else as far as my lack of professionalism with my shop. Of course, having the shop and being out in the middle of a field and having woods down behind the barn and having places to run and hunt and everything else, there were toys that were brought in to me to work on, and I had my own toys. Snowmobile, three-wheeler, four-wheeler, dune buggy, go-karts, motorcycles, street and dirt. Every once in a while, every too often, it was time to go for a ride, and I just left the shop open and go out riding through the fields on a three-wheeler mainly. Go out in the woods, run through the creeks, get all slopped up and come back to the shop and mess around some more. And I guess I'll close this one out learning one more lesson. I had a guy who I knew from school. He worked at the car dealer in Tawnytown. He came down for a U-bolt to be made for one of the school buses he was working on. And I said, all right, I'll have it made up. And I told him when, and he showed up and I didn't have it made. So he said, I'll come back later. Yeah, I said, I'll have it done. He comes back again. And because of me just goofing off, it wasn't done. And I can remember I was on the lathe and he said to me, he says, Kevin, he says, you're screwing up. And I thought about it a second and I said, well, Mike, I like to screw around, but I don't like screwing up. Let me get this thing made for you and I'll bring it up. And so I went ahead. I mean, it took like maybe 15-20 minutes to make this U-bolt. And I couldn't get it done on time. Twice. That's pretty bad. That's really bad. And I also realized after he had said that you know what? I complain about everybody else. I complain when I go up to the auto parts and they don't have the parts that I need. I complain when they said they would have them in and then they wouldn't. I would complain when I went to some other place to have something done and it wasn't done right or it wasn't done on time. Whatever. I was a hypocrite. That's just all I was. And I had to learn that. And after I learned that, that was actually a big turning point in my shop in the way I ran it. A big turning point. So I guess the next time I talk about the shop, I'll clue you in on that. I have to now, the next one probably with a Why Me, I'll have to jump over to my family and talk about that a while. It's kind of hard to mix the two. They're pretty much separate now, except for my wife calling me all the time, which I had to teach her not to. She would call me in the morning right after I would come down the shop. What you doing? I said, I just got here. I said, what are you going to do today? What's it matter? You don't know what I'm doing. You don't understand the shop. And if I start explaining something, you just ignore me anyway. I said, and you realize this is my only phone, so no one else can call while you're on the phone. Then she would call me just before lunch. What do you want to eat? I said, whatever you fix. Stop calling me. Blah, 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 blah. This went on for weeks and weeks and weeks. So anyway, I told her, I said, look, I'm going to just hang up on you. I'm not dealing with this. You're blocking my phone for people who are calling that are customers. And I said, and I have nothing to say to you. So, goodbye. No I love yous. Didn't do that back then. That was still something that I didn't understand. So I never said that over the phone. You know, I was a jerk in a lot of ways. So, anyway, next time, talk about what goes on at home, but also the next time I talk about my shop, I start having my brother-in-law involved as well. That's good, and that's bad, both. So, talk to you next time.